Welcome, world, and welcome to this episode of the Raelian View. Of course, we have our regular protagonists, which is Bridget Bossilier and Thomas Kenzig. Welcome, and I'm sure we'll have a lively and interesting chat. We thought that we would actually discuss the current events happening from the US in Venezuela and just see if we can sort of unpack that and get to the bottom of what's happening, the influence that has on all of us. In fact, various different countries will be affected, and obviously the Raelian perspective on this. So on this subject. So let's jump straight in. So Thomas, you're in the USA. I think Bridget, you're not in the USA right now, are you? Are you in?
Oh.
Half and half, yeah. And I'm definitely not in the USA. I'm across the Atlantic. So, Thomas, can you just bring us up to speed on what happened, what's happening, and the general sort of feeling of in America of these events, because they're quite monumental.
Yes, I guess it was shown on world news how we are back to piracy and gangster-style governments, right? Who just think they can kidnap anybody they want as they please, take what they want, the oil. And I think historically we have to kind of look at the history of this imperialism, this imperialistic attitude in the US. And it actually, the very first probably expression of imperialism was this belief in the early 19th century. It was called the Manifest Destiny. Even Trump, actually, in a speech that he made last year, he referred to that. He was one of in recent time, not a lot of presidents have mentioned this, but it's basically this idea that, again, since the early 19th century was around, saying that the US is the greatest and we bring the light to anywhere else on the planet. And it was basically with this mindset that the early settlers on the East Coast, they headed west, taking land, obviously, killing people, under the pretext of we bring enlightenment and a better life to people, right? And that kind of mindset has persisted in I would say in U.S. society, in the culture, and obviously also in politics for centuries. And let's say more recent decades, there was. You probably heard about the School of Americas that the United States had created. It was basically a military training school that trained a lot of officers from Latin American countries. But in exchange, obviously, the U.S. had a direct link to these people. It helped them overthrow governments, control for the CIA and everything. These governments, I mean, a notable one is Noriega, former president of Panama, he went to this famous or infamous School of the Americas. They now changed the name to something else. He was trained there, and then they helped him basically, get to power through a coup, and then they removed him and imprisoned him on drug charges, right? So it seems that script is happening a lot. It destabilized the region. It's why we've seen a lot of immigration coming from Latin America to the US. And I think, like any situation, that's what I think I'm proud to be a Raelian in the sense that Maitreya Rael, he always provides a solution. We're not, as Raelians, we not only bring or point out a problem, an issue in society, but we have solutions. And interestingly, it was in 2017, Maitreya Rael speaking about a solution for the oppressed countries. He kind of wrote a text and saying, "Get nuclear weapons." And as paradoxical as this may sound for people knowing us, we're the foremost peace lovers on this planet, pacifists. A lot of people saw contradiction there, but even the messages obviously say we should abolish all nuclear weapons, right? And of course, the long-term goal is a total, basically getting rid of all nuclear weapons on this planet. But in the meanwhile, the only way to deter a bully like this mafia-style government in the US, from just barging into a country and randomly picking up a president, claiming resources, basically. The only way to deter them, unfortunately, is by the weak, so to speak, also having a nuclear weapon, because that will, we see that Trump doesn't just, walk into Russia. He doesn't just go to North Korea, because they know they have nuclear weapons, and of course it's unfortunate. We would love to get rid of nuclear weapons as soon as possible, but it seems there's an intermediate stage. We need the weaker countries to be having their own nuclear weapons or be in close relationship with a country that has nuclear weapons, just so we can deter the bully. It's a little bit like the Buddhist monks, who learned martial arts. They never had plans to attack anybody, but it's just so they just don't get killed and so as a deterrent, basically.
Yes, I think that's the key thing. Because I remember when Maitreya mentioned about everybody should get nuclear weapons, because there's one thing abolishing nuclear weapons. There's another thing rendering them useless or insignificant, and everybody having them renders them insignificant and pretty useless unless you want to get annihilated yourself. So, Bridget, do you have any? What did you think and feel as a Raelian, as a level 5, high up in the Raelian movement? What are your feelings when you see a president, any country, forget America, but any country, walking roughshod over another one? Where do we go from here in international law? Where do we go from here as a humanity if this is okay?
It was another demonstration on how violence and weapons can win, and that's terrible. But I would say there's a silver lining in the way it happened, because for the first time it was not disguised into some humanitarian things. They try. I mean, the administration tried to say that Maduro is a narco-terrorist and he would be at the head of some cartel, Los Soles cartels or something like that. And he was killing Americans because of the drugs, and especially the fentanyl that he was sending. Then they realized that there was no fentanyl coming out of Venezuela, but mainly cocaine, if any. And so they changed the indictment into cocaine. And then later on, there was interviews of all these administration people. And whenever, there's one where Lindsey Graham was saying that it's, Maduro is a bad dictator, and then we're saving the people of Venezuela. And then Trump just behind him said, yeah, and we get the oil. The oil, that was the so it's so, I don't know if it's intentional for him to show how much he disregards international law and domestic laws, actually, or if it was a mental lapse. I don't know, but it's so clear, and that's how we got so many international countries out there saying this is not acceptable. I was appalled to see that Emmanuel Macron from France said that the people of Venezuela were saved thanks to this.
Yes. Almost every country's condemned it. Australia support it as well, which I think is very, very odd in the map of support and abstaining and whatever. But I think if we look at it, it's not just American history. I don't want to America bash for one thing, because America does some wonderful things and have done some wonderful things, but the American government, regardless of president, regardless of party, have broken every single treaty that they've ever had with the Native Americans. So, when that is your track record, it's hardly surprising that you would then go run roughshod over anybody you want to when you're more powerful than them. And I think it's interesting what Thomas said a second ago. Going in and taking resources, and you mentioned we'll get the oil. I was just happened to look at a couple of commentators today, and Glenn Beck. I don't know if you know Glenn Beck is a conservative commentator. But he just gave some relevant information, which I thought was very interesting to throw in, which he says Venezuela has the largest proven oil reserves on Earth, 303 billion barrels, which equates to over $17 trillion in today's market value. But that's just oil. Okay, that's just oil. Although he does go on to say that, but of course, this intervention was to do with drugs. He says that, but we know that that's nonsense. That is nonsense. It is nonsense. It's nonsensical, because when we look at these facts, which I thought was very interesting that Glenn Beck brought forward, China buys 60 to 90% of Venezuela's oil. China, right? China's a huge industrial country. They are literally, their economy is, rapidly going to take over the world if the rest of the, if it carries on its current track. So China has 60 to 90% of Venezuela's oil, which undoubtedly President Trump won't now be allowing China to have that, I would imagine. Also, Iran give, let me just check the figures, 70% of China's oil, of its oil to China. So Venezuela, 85 to 90% of its oil goes to China, and Iran, 70% goes to China. So, and Iran is in turmoil. And President Trump has also said, we're prepared. I mean, I've got his quotes here. I'll just look down to what he says. He says, if the Iran crackdown continues, America will step in and stands ready to help the Iranians seek freedom and help them with their oil reserves, no doubt. So it is all about oil. It's almost a war that's already happening, but it's happening without bullets and bombs, by and large. It's global control. It's like everything, big business and global control of anybody who can't stand up and fight back. And it is a very dangerous modus operandi, isn't it? To pursue this level of aggression and this level of control across the globe. I mean, America has controlled. We'll have the largest control of oil reserves on the planet. And if Venezuela also sells to Russia, China will be damaged if they can't get the oil. Their economy will be damaged. That will affect the BRICS organization. The Brazil, India, China, South Africa organization, the economic alliance that they're coming at. That affects their reserve currency. So in one foul swoop of just a couple of interventions in a couple of countries, he's destroyed almost all economic opposition to the dollar. It's quite for people not to see that, and for people not to and to just support that, I think is incredibly worrying. Yeah, incredibly worrying. So where are we with politicians? What do we as a people do? Where is the hope for the little guy? Is it in spirituality? Is it in, because it's certainly not in economics. It's certainly not, the tax burden goes up, and all of those issues are constantly being thrust further and further down the throats of the people. So what is the alternative? What do we do?
Well, the first thing is that what I was saying before is that it's so obvious now that nobody can deny the fact that the US is doing that for colonization, for the oil, for the resource. They want to manage the country. And I will always remember when Trump was elected the first time, Rael said he's probably going to be the best, or he's the best president that the United States has ever had. And so it was difficult to process when you are in the US and you see his take on immigrants and Mexicans, and then and even women and gay and all these. The number one thing that Nigeria is always looking at is that, are you going to war? And the US has been to war for so many, not a century, but years, decades, that having a president who comes and be elected and saying, I will not, we don't need to go into war, we will not bomb anyone, we will not intervene into the politics of any other country. That was the first, and that was amazing. Obviously, just an electoral promise and nothing more. And now we see the true face of that. But the reality, especially I would say in South America, the African countries have been colonized for so long and they are waking up. But in South America, there have been quite a few resistance to it. Like when Chavez arrived, he naturalized the oil. Exxon, Sunoco, all these big American companies, the US were exploiting the oil at the time. And he said, no, you cannot have a company exploiting the oil and owned by a foreign entity. So 51% have to be owned by the state. That was in 2004. And that's when it started to get bad for Venezuela. At the time, Chavez was nominated honorary guide. It was a clear statement by Rael that this type of resistance is what we need to do. And so it went on. And in 2013, that Maduro succeeded to Chavez, and they were from the same party and same philosophy. Then in 2020 that Maduro was indicted by the Department of Justice of the United States, and he became honorary guide as well. So we had two honorary guides nominated by Rael in Venezuela for the same reason, for the clear statement of anti-colonialism and the resistance to the attempt of the United States to take over their resources and their decision, right? Colombia has been doing the same with Evo Morales, and then we have even, I think, Correa, also president, has been nominated honorary guide after giving asylum to Julian Assange. So this I mean, the resistance in South America is vibrant, and so we have to support that and help also our brothers and sisters from South America who were part of it. I mean, I know they are contributing to all what is. I mean, to these attempts to stop this imperialism to change the life and their decision, right? When you realize the Department of Justice of the United States put a reward of $50 million on the head of Maduro in August 2025, it's the far west. It's like, I missed that in the news, but I read that just before about talking here, and then it's, what are we talking about? So yeah, so as an individual, being making sure that this understanding of what's going on is understood as widely as possible. It's impossible. I mean, the United States headquarters is in New York, and so they are trapped into this, right? So the United Nations may not be the right tool for that, but there have been complaints. The president of Colombia clearly had a very good case showing that the 3 tankers that were taken by the US in pretense that they were carrying drugs and they were only having barrels. All these probably went into the Gulf of Mexico, the Gulf of America, to be treated, yes, in all these refinery of Texas, and that is not acceptable.
Can I just, I think it was 1991 in it might have been Slovenia, Slovakia, somewhere like that, that President Putin announced that he'd approached America. It was in a live press conference with George Bush, and he said, yes, we approached America to see if we could join NATO and be allies, because we would like to be allies as Russia. We don't want to be in an adversarial position with the USA. And again, it was the response was, we don't. Basically, it was so. I'm paraphrasing, but we don't have to go into how ridiculous that offer is. Was the response from the USA. And then a couple of years later, he then, I think it was Madeleine Albright, the foreign secretary of the USA, when Putin was asked by a journalist, so where do you stand now on becoming a member of NATO? To take away the confrontation between the West and Russia. He said yes. Why not? Why not? And Albright said, we're not discussing that now. End of story. Because it's not about it. It's a political game of, you can sell weapons if you've got conflict. No conflict, little interest in weapons. So you're selling weapons. If you do go to war with a smaller country, and you obliterate their infrastructure, you're selling contracts to businesses, your own businesses from your own country, to come in and rebuild that country, of which they then charge the country that they bombed for all of the rebuilding. So it's a massive economic process. It's a monstrous game, and it's a continual monstrous game. And I don't know why it's just not called out continually, and it isn't called out anywhere near enough. It is just a game of we need an opposition, we need somebody to paint as the bad guy. So okay, now it's Putin. But let's just look at what President Trump has just said. He's just said, I've got his quotes here, talking about Greenland. He said about Greenland, he said, if we don't take Greenland's Danish, right? It's a Danish territory. So if we don't take Greenland, you're going to have Russia and China as your next door neighbor. And that cannot happen. That's not going to happen. Except if you look at Alaska, which is an American territory, how close is Russia to that? It's like this far away on the map, so they're already neighbors to start with. It's just a nonsensical thing. But if it is true that America are really truly consider, he also goes on to say, sorry to jump around, but he says, I'd like to make a deal with Greenland, but if they, and I'd like to do it the easy way, but if they don't do it the easy way, we'll do it the hard way, which obviously is an aggressive threat to take over a country of which they already have military bases in, apparently. But that creates such a weird situation. For example, Europe has said, nobody attacks Europe, we will stand together as Europe. So they're increasing their budgets, and each country in Europe must add to their national budgets to make a European army in order to fight Russia and support Ukraine, because apparently Ukraine was attacked and were totally innocent in all of this, which is not true at all, I don't believe. But they were that happened. So Europe has said this. So if America which America are also supporting Ukraine, obviously. So if America attack Greenland or take over Greenland, that is also attacking a European territory. So therefore, America are now at war with Europe, Russia, and Europe are at war with Russia and America. And it's just a crazy, nonsensical bunch of nonsense that is just there to keep, in my view, people afraid, and economics, raise taxes for this effort and that effort, and it absolutely drives me crazy. And I tend to just laugh at it. I find myself laughing out loud at some of the statements that come out of many countries, including the UK right now. Politics is a problem, but I think what's worth saying is that the Raelian movement have been offering a solution to this for years and years and years and years and years. And as far as I can see, it's the only credible thing that the man in the street can do. And we run meditation sessions called 1 Minute for Peace. And we do a meditation where we try and gather as many people from around the world to meditate on peace. So the Raelian movement have had this 1 Minute for Peace thing. And there's some interesting studies that have concluded through research some interesting facts. And that is that when people meditate together in a group, a large group from wherever in the world, whether they're separated in the world, it doesn't matter. What apparently matters is the amount of people, and the greatest effect that it has statistically, which has been measured by looking at crime rates in America where the study was done. They had 1,725 people is what I gather is the minimum amount of people that has this level of effect. So they had people meditating, and they discovered by looking at the murder rates, violent crime rates at the time and during the meditation, and homicidal rates reduced at a rate of 21.2% during the meditation. And the violent crime rate reduction was 18.5% decrease in urban violent crime rates during the same intervention period when they were actually doing the meditation. So against the Raelian philosophy, it always comes back for me to the Raelian philosophy that Maitreya has brought us this teaching, and meditation has been around for a long time. But what he's done is he's actually told us, but this is the effect that it will have when we do it, and then the science then catches up and says, well, we've studied this, and this is the effect, and it's always correct what his assertions have been. So, is that the way forward, Bridget? Thomas, is that the way forward? Is for us to become more spiritually aware, more?
Yeah, I agree. The peace meditations, that's definitely something that we all can do individually. And earlier I talked about the solution for the aggressed, the weaker ones, the nuclear weapons. Something that crossed my mind in recent days is actually more think about the aggressor, the bullies in the world. And Maitreya, for many years, he's been talking, and I really think it links in well, like what we're seeing these days, and I'll get to that right away. But it's Maitreya's been talking about secession.
Uh-huh.
And he was basically explaining that we need smaller countries, and he has advocated for secessionist movements to secede from the central government, mainly in the big countries, U.S., Russia, obviously, and China. And we have to understand. I mean, basically, what he was explaining is that by having smaller countries with a smaller central government, you also remove the big armies, right? And so that'd be really a good solution for the planet. And if you look at in China, for example, there's mainly dominated by the Han ethnic group, but there's over 50 ethnic groups in China. In the US, we've supported in connection with the embassy project, secessionist movements in the US and in California and Texas. And one of the big arguments, and I say this because, again, you probably saw it like most of us on the news, where we now have this big federal police, like the Gestapo, going around the country, arresting people, and even tragic cases like shooting people and killing people, like last week in Minneapolis, right? And I think we now may enter also a day and age where the idea of secession may be on more fertile grounds, I should say, because you got to look at it. California, for example, if you look at the GDP of California, if it would be a separate country, it would be the number 4 country in the world. So then you can ask yourself, well, hang on, why, if you're in California, why should we have these Gestapo federal police come and do all this in our state? Well, if we just, become independent, we don't need the rest here, and we'd be a decent sized economy. Same for Texas. Texas would be a number 8 in the world if it would be a country. So I do think this, with all that's happening right now, we may also be moving towards a more fertile ground for something Rael has been advocating for a long time. It is basically the splitting up of these big countries that have big armies, and through that secession, basically move to smaller countries and a more peaceful world ultimately.
Yeah, and Texas, the Constitution of Texas is fantastic. The actual written Constitution, because it gives sovereignty to the individual and not the corporate state. It's probably the best one in the United States and possibly even the world. Sorry, Bridget, you were going to say something.
And the power of people together, as you said, with the meditation, it's also happening with the right now that they are 80% of the American against what Trump did in Venezuela, until 2%. That is huge. So yeah, it's not. It's going to have a hard time to keep going in that way, and it's waking up people. So yeah, hopefully there will be secessions, separations, and all that. It's going to be difficult to go ahead, but the alternative is that what is Trump has been doing, threatening 7 countries since January 3rd: Venezuela, Iran, Nigeria, Mexico, Denmark, Colombia, Cuba, and so just in what 10 days. So nothing. I mean, I'm very hopeful and really optimistic. Part is very happy in the sense that I don't think that it can go anywhere. No country is willing to go to war. I don't think we can motivate the French people to go and defend Greenland, but I don't think we can motivate the the American people to go and fight for Greenland, right? So it's to get Greenland. So I feel that there will be a massive eruption of the people, the real people who will say.
Yeah, and I think you're right, and I think that is the hope. The hope is that these ridiculous situations and scenarios that are happening all over the place, and it's the same reaction that was happening in England and the United Kingdom and London, where people were saying, would you go, journalists were saying, would you go and defend Ukraine? He says, well, if Keir Starmer wants us to go into it, then he should go. If he wants to go himself, then I'll take over his job, but I'm not going to go and fight. I think this because it's a global awakening, I think, of people, all these, from even long before the COVID draconian measures and nonsense that happened with that, and the mRNA gene therapy stuff that happened. I think people were beginning to have an awakening, and that awakening continues. And I think the more we talk about it and the more we ridicule the nonsense of the way that these global leaders behave and talk and speak, and also patronize the people by saying this is important when it's actual nonsense, it's just control techniques, the better. We need to keep talking and keep sharing ideas and views, and hopefully, every day more people will awaken to the ridiculousness of these sort of behaviors on an international scale.
So, speaking about the awakening, Glenn, just something that crossed my mind here. I never have big hopes from politicians, but it was interesting to see, and I don't know if he's a senator or a member of the House of Representatives, but his name is Kelly, and he basically, he told the former military, highly decorated military man, but he said, he publicly stated, he called upon all the soldiers in the U.S. military, do not carry out an illegal order. And that's pretty interesting how far things, so there is, again, I never put a lot of hopes on politicians, but it's interesting to see that even among them, some stand out, and that's, of course, now they're trying to cut his pension or even court martial and all that, but it's happening in the public arena, so it's going to be interesting. But that kind of made me, hopeful that even among the politicians, there's some that stick out their neck and things are heading in the right direction there.
Yeah, there are brave people everywhere, and let's support them. Let's forget about party lines, because obviously the Raelian movement's it's political, but it's non-party political. We don't support any particular party. It's nonsense. So let's just support people who are actually having the good fight, fighting the good fight. And although Jimmy Carr, who's an English comedian, was saying that there is a revolution coming, a peaceful revolution, and the guy that was interviewing said, how many revolutions do you know were peaceful? Can you name any? But I think this is a peaceful revolution in the sense that there's a revolution happening within humanity where people are becoming awake. We're becoming to recognize the BS that exists from our so-called leaders, self-appointed or appointed by corporations. And the more we talk about it, the more we air these thoughts, the better. So thank you. It's been interesting. A quick half hour, but it's an interesting chat, and yes, I hope to see you again soon with another interesting subject. Thank you, Thomas. Thank you, Bridget. Thank you so much.